can be tough to perfect the murderous villain persona. Being a super evil, psychologically messed up individual can be a difficult reputation to uphold. Unfortunately for these bad guys, their slip-ups cost them their freedom, lives, and reputation. It's a demanding profession, murdering people, and sometimes the pressure gets to you. So with that in mind then, I'm Ellie with What Culture, here with 10 horror movie villains who broke their own rules. Number 10. The Gremlins forgot their own rules in Gremlins. Everyone knows what to do and what not to do when it comes to dealing with Joe Dante's vicious little gremlins. There are 3 basic rules for looking after your pre-gremlin mogwai. Never feed them past midnight, don't let them catch the sun's rays, and never ever get them wet. We all know this, but it appears that the mogwai themselves will sometimes forget the rules. In the film, the cute little bundles of fur are depicted running around in the snow. As we all know, snow is the frozen form of water and should then in theory have the same effect on the prepubescent creatures. This is apparently not the case, as the mogwai do not start to multiply in the scene, breaking their rules and the laws of basic science. The only time we see the mogwai start to multiply is when they actually touch water. Technically, they're breaking their own rule, but the director doesn't actually hold them responsible for their actions and they get away with the little slip-up. What was obviously a slight overlook on the director's part should have resulted in a much bigger problem than what was depicted in the film. Number 9. Hannibal Lecter doesn't eat Clarice in Hannibal. Hannibal may not have a rule about who he eats and who he lets live, but he definitely makes it a priority to cover his tracks and maintain his indulgent lifestyle. When it comes to Clarice, this rule goes right out the window. Thank goodness it does, otherwise we wouldn't have a story, would we? The Hannibal Lecter character is presented with plenty of opportunities to eat and devour Detective Clarice Starling, but he always manages to restrain himself. Even while holding the unconscious cop in his arms, he is able to fight his own temptations and let her live. How does he expect to maintain his lavish lifestyle if he allows the only person who will ever be able to take him down to live? The number 1 rule of being a serial killer is to leave no trail. Clarice Starling is one big trail, and he practically left her with all the clues and a map. Clarice isn't the only person Lecter has left with their life semi-intact. He also makes the mistake of not killing Mason Verger. This is less of a mistake as it is a nuisance, but it put a massive target on his back. Number 8. Norman Bates invites a girl over in Psycho. Norman Bates is a pretty sloppy, cold-blooded killer, but you can't really blame him. The original Bates is in a constant struggle with his mother, and in the 1960 movie, he makes the terrible mistake of breaking her rule and inviting a girl over. The mistake only really turns out terrible for damsel Marion, but it all could have ultimately been prevented if Norman had just followed his mother's rules. The mistake does result in the death of Marion, but it also creates a bit of unwanted buzz at the Bates motel when her loved ones come looking for her. For those unfamiliar with the film, by breaking mother's rule, Norman essentially breaks his own rule, as he is in fact Mrs. Norma Bates. After murdering his own mother, Bates adopts her personality as one of his own and allows her personality to control him. You can't blame an insane man for wanting a bit of company, but he should have ultimately known how his mother would have reacted. But that could be the exact reason why he did invite Marion for dinner. Number 7. Jason forgets his fear of water in Friday the 13th franchise. Even bad guys have their weaknesses, and as it turns out, Jason, the serial killer who murders people brutally with a machete, has a fear of water. This slip-up is mostly down to a Friday the 13th plot hole that fans picked up during Ronnie Yu's Freddy vs. Jason. In an attempt to take his nemesis down, Freddy adopts his fear tactic and uses Jason's apparent trauma-related phobia of water to get to him. It makes sense, as in the original Friday the 13th film, we're told that Jason drowned as a child, but it has never stopped Jason in the past. Across a few of the Friday the 13th pictures, Jason can be seen taking a dip in a creepy lake or two with no signs that he may have a fear of the water. In fact, he seems quite calm while creepily emerging from his swim breaks. Why did they decide to randomly pick up on the fear in this film then? Jason apparently regularly ignores his rule to go nowhere near water until his own life hangs in the balance. Not the smartest of moves, Mr. Voorhees. Number 6. The Tooth Fairy goes on a date in Red Dragon. Another villain with mummy-related issues is the Red Dragon co-antagonist Francis Dolarhyde. This chap takes it a step further and actually has a deep fear when it comes to his mother's mother. After being abandoned by his ma when he was younger, Dolarhyde spends a few years in an orphanage before his grandmother takes him and subjects him to severe emotional and physical abuse. Tormented by her long after her death, Dolarhyde adopts her personality as his conscience and ultimately goes on a killing rampage in an attempt to transform into his ultimate form, the dragon. One mistake he makes is letting his guard down by inviting the lovely Reba McClane over. He falls in love with her, which further infuriates the voices in his head. It's no wonder he had stuck to the no friends rule for so long. After breaking the rule and allowing things to become more sexual with Reba, things start to go downhill for the killer, and he tries to reverse it all by murdering her. He doesn't kill her, as her blindness means he hasn't been given away and he instead fakes his own death. It's always a good rule of thumb to avoid making friends if you plan on murdering lots of people. It's a pretty lonely profession. Number 5. Mike and Heather abandon all of their sense and sensibility in the Blair Witch Project. When it comes to the Blair Witch Project, many are undecided about who the real villain is. In a movie such as this one, it is mostly left up to the viewer to decide what exactly went down and who was to blame. Mike and Heather may not have been murderous evil entities, but they did do some pretty irrational and stupid things throughout the film. Mike breaks one of the most basic unspoken rules when it comes to exploring the wild and working in a team. By throwing away the only map the team had, he screws them all over and essentially seals their tomb. He also makes himself enemy number 1 for the viewers and does very little after that to try and make up for it. Heather is villainized by her crewmates and again by herself when making the video to say sorry to her friends' families. She's also incredibly whiny and pushes everyone to do more than they liked. The rule that she broke, which ultimately ended in her death, was when she decided to leave the tent. After first hearing their missing friends' cries coming from the woods, the remaining duo agreed that as a rule, neither of them would leave the tent as it was probably a trick. Eventually they give in, and we all know what happens after that. This all could have been prevented if either of them had simply stuck to the rules. Number 4. Hedwig helps Casey in Split. Hedwig breaks rule number 1 of being a murderous serial killer with no empathy. He gives Casey the key to her escape. Hedwig may not have been the personality to have kidnapped Casey with the plan to kill her, but he is the same person as Dennis. Split is a film about a man with multiple personalities who kidnaps 3 girls after their dad has picked them up from a shopping trip. As the story unfolds, we are introduced to all of Kevin's personalities, and one of the girls, Casey, starts to plan how she can outsmart her captor and his personalities. While trying to find a way to escape from the basement, Casey befriends one of Kevin's many personalities. Hedwig is a 9-year-old boy who can take over from Dennis and Kevin when he pleases. He's quite fond of Casey and she uses this to her advantage. After showing Casey the walkie-talkie that he stole from Dennis, Casey convinces him to let her use it. Casey then uses it to try and contact a security guard and explain that she has been kidnapped. Before she can get any further, Dennis re-emerges and stops her. Hedwig may be an innocent personality, but he still broke Dennis's rules and almost helped Casey escape. Number 3. Thomas Wake breaks practically every rule in The Lighthouse. Robert Eggers sure has a knack for all things horrific and disturbing, and The Lighthouse is no exception. Willem Dafoe's performance is brilliant in the most gruesome way. Thomas Wake's character is a lighthouse keeper with a stormy past. As the new wiki arrives, it becomes clear that Wake isn't the best role model, boss, or human. He breaks many of the basic lighthouse rules, which angers his fellow wiki Ephraim and causes a lot of tension. For starters, Wake is never without his bottle of turpentine. The liquid is highly intoxicating and when mixed with honey can drive the sanest of men to their wits' end. He also never divides the duties with Ephraim despite it being in the contract he drew up. The rules he breaks most certainly have something to do with the outcome of the story. If the two men were a little soberer and a little less resentful of each other, they may have been able to work something out. Then again, both have a murderous past with a bit of blood splatter on their hands. Number 2. Mayor Vaughn forgets what his job is in Jaws. The man who could have prevented it all if he had simply listened. If Mayor Vaughn had listened to Brody and Hooper, there would have been a lot less death in the peaceful town of Amity. The number 1 rule of being a mayor for the people is looking out for the welfare of your citizens and keeping them safe. While Larry Vaughn wasn't doing this, he was busy being concerned about bringing in the cash and keeping the people at the top happy. While the worry about where your town's income will come from is important, caring for your people's lives should be ranked a bit higher on the list of concerns. When confronted with the facts about a manhunter on on the loose, the mayor decided to ignore the evidence and go ahead with the summer beach season, opening up the beaches and essentially offering up a buffet to Mr. Bruce. His actions betray the people of Amity and result in a lot of death that could have been prevented if he had gotten his priorities straight and followed the basic rules of being a mayor. One thing is for sure, he probably won't be re-elected. Number 1. Carter Thing breaks Carter's rules in The Thing. While Carter was perfectly happy to burn the first signs of imitation in any of his crewmates, the Thing version of him was less eager to stick to this rule. When it comes to alien mutations and deciding on whether or not they have indeed taken over your friends, it can be tough to justify taking the time to determine whether or not they are who they say they are. It's often a better choice to just go with your gut and torch them with a flamethrower. Carter does a perfect job of this when dealing with Peter, Edvard and Sander. When the tables had been turned by fellow survivor Kate, Carter, who was suspected to be a Thing himself, was understandably less eager to be on the other side of a flamethrower. Wearing his earring on the wrong ear was enough for crewmate Kate, and thankfully she listened to her gut. As the book and the alien screeches that came from the snowcat confirmed, she was right to suspect him of being a Thing. Carter Thing died because of Carter's rules, but he didn't go down without a conversational fight. Who knows what would have happened if Kate had agreed to think before flamethrowing. And that concludes our list. If you can think of any that we missed, then do let us know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. Also, head over to Twitter and follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with What Culture. I hope you have a magical day, and I'll see you real soon.